Hello and welcome back to the Ramble, where today we're going to be discussing the disappointing draw and ultimate knockout by Sporting Lisbon in the Europa League last 16. As always, I'm joined by my co-rambler Dom. How are you, mate? You're good?
I'm all good, thanks, Dave. I'm in a bit of a mixed mindset and feeling over what happened last night in the Europa League. It's one of those where I wasn't really sure if I wanted us to progress so far in this competition, just because of all the extra games. It looks like from the draw we would have had maybe Juventus in the next round, and then the winner of the Man United Sevilla game, and that's an extra four tough games which we would have had to have played our first 11 essentially, and then there would have been the final after that. So there was that side of me all game really thinking about that last night. But then at the same time, it's hard to get past the fact that we've essentially just fumbled another shot at some silverware this season, which, you know, as a football fan, that's what we're here for. So mixed feelings really, but yeah, pretty good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all good. Yeah, to be fair, pretty similar with me, to be honest. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't want Arsenal to win this trophy. Because, like you say, it's silverware. It's a European trophy, which we haven't won in a very, very long time. Um, and yeah, it's just it's a weird one because our focus just didn't seem to be there. We've got plenty of first teamers in this starting 11, and there have been it throughout the previous game as well in Sporting. But it just seemed like they've got one eye on the Premier League almost. That they just didn't seem up for it. It almost seems like we were just trying to play the game at one gear less, and you just can't get away with that. We just looked tired. Our minds looked elsewhere. Um, and to be honest, that is quite understandable to a point. And like we said in previous podcasts, I'm kind of on the fence whether we should have just sort of done a full Arsene Wenger and played kids, and got kicked out maybe and gone. Well, who cares? But now in hindsight, I wish we just did that because now we're looking back at a game where we've played 120 minutes. We've got injuries. We've got potential injuries that we may not even know about because even Trossard and that limped off the pitch. And it just adds to the disappointment of a really deflating night. But there's plenty of silver linings that have come from this, and we'll obviously get our teeth stuck into that a little bit later. But yeah, ultimately, just a little bit deflated, and a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, that was one of my main takeaways from the game as well, is the fact that you've got to either be completely for it and have all your players really up for it and gunning straight from the off, because it did look like during the game they did have, as you say, one eye on the Premier League, and they weren't really going gun ho. Or
Mm.
if you're not going to go for that approach, as you say, just play all your kids, because if you get knocked out, then you're not too worried about it. But it did seem like we were a bit in between, where we wanted to still progress. So we played all of our decent players, minus one or two from the off. And then you're in this position where you've had so many of your decent players now absolutely shattered from playing 120 minutes, a few injuries cropping up, which we're going to talk about as well. And essentially you ended up losing the game anyway. So I think it's
Yeah,
probably the worst outcome of what could have happened, but
yeah,
that's just the way it is, I guess.
it is just what happened, isn't it? We can't do anything about it now. Just got to try and look towards that weekend fixture against Palace and hope that everything's okay. But we won't know until 1 hour before kickoff whether we've sustained any further injuries that we don't know about, because Arteta's clearly going to keep that close to his chest. But yeah, you could clearly see that Arteta wanted this by the substitutions he was making. He was throwing all the big guns on. And to be honest, it did make a difference when Saka and Partey came on. We looked a hell of a lot better. It was just a little bit too late, to be honest. But anyway, let's go on to the starting lineup as we always do, and sort of discuss our thoughts on that. Because in the when we were discussing what we thought he might do at the end of the previous game and at the first leg, we sort of queried about whether he would go stronger now the game's sort of in balance, or whether he'd stick with some of the players like Turner, for example, in goal. And I think I was under the impression that he'd stick with Turner, sort of show that faith in him, but he's obviously not. He's gone with Ramsdale. He's gone with a very strong back line of Zinchenko and Gabriel, Saliba and Tomiyasu. So yeah, as we've just echoed, he clearly wanted to go strong in this second leg, didn't he?
Yeah, I think the players which really tended to underperform in the first leg was both Turner and Kivior. Two players who you felt like the only opportunity for them to really have another start would have been in this second leg. However, I think Arteta saw that the way that they struggled in that first game, it would have been naive maybe for Arteta to have played them again, just because he saw how clear and obvious the errors were that they made, that I think he felt like his hand was forced, and he probably had to start Ramsdale and had to start Gabriel. So yeah, I don't really blame him for that one. And also, as you say, we had quite a strong back line. We had Saliba, Gabriel, Zinchenko as well. I think it was rumoured that Tierney was going to start this game because he's back and he wasn't ill like he was in the first leg. But I think just by the names that are on the team sheet, it really did show that we were almost feeling like we really wanted to get the job done in the first half in this game. You know, like maybe score one or two, blow them away, and then we can try and rest players. But unfortunately, as we saw, that didn't actually happen. But with having Jesus come back into the squad, maybe playing these more experienced players around Jesus was trying to be, from Arteta's point of view, trying to be more of a catalyst to be able to give Jesus some opportunities to be able to create and score and get right back into the flow of things. It's almost like an audition back for the Premier League, because if he did want to thrust Jesus back into this game and have a load of kids around him, for example, then he's not going to get the opportunities, and he might not be as up to speed when we need him in the Premier League. So he could have had that on his mind as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. To be fair, I think like you say, we went out with a pretty strong team, a team that was more than good enough to beat the Sporting Lisbon team. And when Xhaka got that early goal, I couldn't help but think this is going to be just sort of one of those games where we just plod along and just stick a goal in every now and again, and then ease it out with some substitutions like a Tierney, for example. But ultimately, we've had players like Zinchenko play 120 minutes, which really does worry me a little bit because he's so key to this Arsenal team. To have him on tired legs for Sundays is a little bit of a worry. But like you say, we have got Tierney, who is very good. As a backup, he is a different type of fullback, but to have that, hopefully, if we need, then that's only a good thing. Anyway, so moving on, let's get into the game, because we've already touched on certain elements already anyway. But in the first half, I think all the Arsenal fans were a little bit blown away, really, because Sporting really did dominate with possession early on, and we just couldn't get hold of the ball. And it's just not something we're really used to, is it?
No, especially as we're such a possession-based team. It was really weird that I think about 13 minutes in, I remember looking at the clock and thinking, we've not actually had the ball at all, really. And we've not been able to string more than two passes together before we actually give it away, because Sporting, to be fair to them, they were pressing well, they were keeping the ball well, they were recycling around the back and managing to actually create a few half-decent opportunities in our half. So that was something that we weren't really expecting. And it was a bit of a follow-on from the first leg, the fact that they just seemed more up for this game. They seemed more up for the first leg, seemed more up for the second leg, Sporting. I think maybe it could be something to do with the fact that they're not really in touching distance of winning their title, respective title in Portugal. So it's probably their only shot at silverware this season. So they're going to be going hell for leather for it. But yeah, they just seemed up for it, and we looked quite sluggish. As you say, and we said before, they looked like they had one eye or somewhere else, so they weren't putting all their eggs in this basket kind of thing. But first 15, 20 minutes didn't really touch the ball until, we actually ended up managing to make that chance that fell to Xhaka, and he put it away smartly, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, but going back, I think you're spot on with the assessment of Sporting. I think that they're domestically they are not really in with the shout of the league, so all their focus is on this Europa League. And I think that personally, the way they played over the two legs, I think they've got enough to be able to go far in this competition.
Mm.
So fair play to them. But with Arsenal, obviously, it would be great to have a European competition, but and as we've said before, Arteta's clearly going fairly strong in this. So I think he does want to win it. Um, it's just, it hasn't gone that way. The players clearly have one mind, one eye elsewhere, and yeah, it just sort of transpired into the performances on the pitch, and ultimately we just couldn't match their intensity and they were just the passing was so accurate and quick, and we were just one gear less. We were taking too many touches on the ball, um, and I really don't want to criticize a single player too much because it's not something I particularly like to do. But Vieira really was a bit of a problem in that midfield for us. He was taking far too long on the ball. He was just not at the game today, which is really frustrating because we were just starting to see decent performances from Vieira, especially in that first leg game away at Sporting. I thought he was one of the better players in that game, and you couldn't help but think a Portuguese player who came from that league, he sort of may have had a little bit of a point to prove, but he was one of the worst performers in this game, I would say, and that was really really frustrating to see.
Yeah, he did underperform a fair bit, and predominantly if we're actually looking at that right attacking side. So building up, usually we would have, for example, Partey, Odegaard, and Saka, but we had Jorginho, Vieira, and Nelson. So all three players were swapped out from our first 11, and we you could tell really that we weren't creating much on that side, which is somewhere where we're usually such a threat in almost every game because of the likes of Saka and Odegaard, for example. So it almost made it so that if Sporting were to then cover their right-hand side, where we had the likes of Martinelli going down the wings, that we wouldn't really have much of a threat. One thing that I did pick up, which I thought was quite refreshing, actually, from that right side, was some of the crosses that Nelson managed to whip in with his right foot. It's something that we've not really seen from either side, really, having a play from that side using that foot kind of thing, like a right-footed cross from the right. We see Saka sometimes going down the byline and cutting it back with his right, or cutting in and using his left foot for a cross. But yeah, it was quite refreshing to see a few right-footed old school style crosses from that side. But unfortunately, we don't have the type of player in the centre to be able to capitalise on those kind of opportunities. So it's almost rendered invalid. There's no point even chucking that crossing in the first place unless it's pinpoint accurate to Jesus or whatever. But yeah, we were definitely a lot weaker on that side, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah, and like you say, around 90 minutes in, we did eventually get that opening goal, thanks to Martinelli going through. His shot was saved pretty well. Who I must say, that keeper is a quality keeper. I know he's come from the Real Madrid academy. He played, was it for Atletico Madrid and a little bit of Betis maybe, but he's a very experienced keeper, and I think he really showed that today because he did yesterday. Sorry, he had a really good performance. But yeah, Xhaka ultimately there to turn in the rebound, and that nice little celebration for his daughter, who I noticed his wife on social media put a photo of his daughter sort of doing it back to him, sorry, which I thought was really nice. I think the Sporting Lisbon players seem to misunderstand that one because I think they sort of took a little bit of a gripe to it at the full time whistle, as they sort of were doing it back in jest as if it was some sort of personal insult. Did you see all that or?
Yeah, I saw it was the final penalty taker for them, wasn't it? After he buried it in we eventually ended up losing the game. I think he started to copy the celebration. But I guess, in football, if you're going to do a celebration like that, regardless of the meaning, you've got to just take it on the chin if they replicate it and do it back to you. I think, it's one of those things that players sometimes make. I think you've just got to accept it. I guess it was done in jest. And yeah, just a bit of fun, really. I don't think Xhaka's going to take too much offence to it, really, as he's not going to think about it twice.
No.
But unfortunately, around this time in the first half, we actually had 2 major injuries as well, just before the goal and just after the goal. Tomiyasu before, meaning that Ben White had to come on and then play the remainder of the game, which was minutes that he shouldn't really have had to play before Sunday. And what is a bigger loss, I would say, was William Saliba. Now, I didn't really see what happened to Saliba. I'm not sure how he got injured or what he even injured. I just saw him being substituted off for Roberto Holdini. So that was something from the game, which, regardless of whether we won or lost, we really could have done without.
Massively, yeah. Like we said at the start, to have injuries in this sort of game is the last thing we want. I must say the Tomiyasu one looks a lot more serious. It looks as if it's a knee problem, and as we both know, as we've both done ACLs ourselves, that knees are not the area you want to be injuring, and that sort of movement as well. He slips and essentially does the splits almost. And that's the exact type of movement that can cause ligament damage. So if that is the case, then we could be looking like that's his season over and probably a big part of the summer period as well. So that's a really, really frustrating one. Really disappointing. And I also saw that he left on crutches as well, which sort of adds to that factor that it's not looking too good for Tomiyasu. With the Saliba one, it does look a little bit more promising. I saw him sort of indicating to Ramsdale actually on the TV. He was sort of pointing to his lower back to say that he's got some pain there. I didn't see any sort of challenge that could indicate that it's like a muscular from going up for a header or something like that. I didn't see anything like that. So I think it might just be maybe like a back spasm or something like that. Hopefully something not too serious that, just a couple of days out will help him recover. But, that's the best we can hope for, really. If it's something more long term, then he will be huge to miss from our centre-back pairing for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And especially the loss of them both, because we can always do a little rejig and a reshift. For example, if Saliba was to be out for a couple of games, then you could maybe put Ben White back in centre-back where he was partnering Gabriel last season and put Tomiyasu at right back. However, if they're both out, then that right side of options just become quite thin. And then we're looking at maybe Rob Holding starting the Premier League, which he can do a job to see out a game every now and then, but you really don't want him in a team that plays out from the back. We progress from there. He's not as great with his feet and his passing ability. So pretty much all of our build-up from the back would be in jeopardy by having Rob Holding play. And that's just something we don't want to see. So hopefully Saliba will be all right. And hopefully Tomiyasu hasn't had such a massive injury. It did look like he hyperextended his leg, didn't he, when he went in for that challenge? He leans through and then the player shimmies and he's not expecting him to. So it does look like his leg just overstretches a little bit. So maybe a bit of a knee injury, but fingers crossed he's all right. But after that, we had quite a bit of a lull in the game, really. It seemed like it was just drifting. We seemed quite comfortable. We didn't have a lot of the ball. But it didn't really look like we were going to create many opportunities or concede many opportunities. It was just kind of going through the motions a little bit. And then all of a sudden, in a snapshot, oh my God, what a finish. I think it was Pedro Goncalves for Sporting Lisbon from just inside the halfway line. To be honest, I hate it when we concede. I'm obviously never pleased when we concede, but I had to just clap when this went in, because I thought, wow, what a goal that was. He
Mm.
rifled the way. He saw Ramsdale off his line, because he does play that sweeper keeper role. And to be fair to Ramsdale, it gets us out of a lot of sticky situations when he's there to receive the ball from these through ball opportunities. But I think they must have studied this. They saw him off his line, hits the ball, perfect execution, and then it just floats into the net. And you've just got to say hats off to that guy.
You have really, because I don't think I think like 99 times out of 100 that misses. He has to hit that in that exact spot where it's just sort of dipping enough to come underneath the bar. And Ramsdale were pretty close, to be fair. Um, so yeah, you just sort of have to sort of applaud it, really, like you say. Not a lot we could do about that. I don't think you can really criticize Arsenal anyway, apart from sort of giving the ball away cheaply in midfield in the first place, which we sort of was a theme of the whole night, really, giving the ball away cheaply. So eventually it was going to hurt us. I just didn't think it would be in that sort of way. But yeah, like you say, we just have to sort of take that one on the chin, and hopefully that could have been the driving factor to really help us push on and kill the game off, but it just didn't seem to transpire that way. I think even less than 10 minutes later, Ramsdale had to pull off an absolute worldy save, didn't he, from Edwards, the ex Tottenham player as well, and that would have been a real sort of dagger to the heart, wouldn't it? An ex Tottenham player finishing off the game 2-1. But that was a quality save with his face, pushing to knock him out almost instantly. But it doesn't matter how you save him. That was a crucial, or hopefully what would have been a crucial save to keep us in the game. But ultimately, it took us to extra time because we didn't really create that many clear-cut chances ourselves up until the full-time whistle.
Yeah, I was going to say it would have been great if we did click into gear once we had conceded, but as you say, it did seem like the opposite happened. And
Yeah.
to be fair to Ramsdale, that is an unbelievable save. In the face of adversity, he uses his face. And yeah, I was hoping that we could maybe fashion one kind of opportunity for us to just settle the game and put it to bed. But it did seem like we were just overcomplicating things sometimes. Most notably, Vieira and Trossard both getting into situations in the opposition's penalty box where they'd get the ball in a decent area, they'd have time to maybe pull off a shot or at least get something on target, and they just opted to go for maybe like a little back heel pass without looking to where it's going. Really frustrating to lose the ball there when you've worked so hard to get it into that area, to then just do a blind back heel to nobody, and then we lose the ball, and then it's 5 or 10 minutes before we can actually get the ball back again. You think just at least have a go. It could go anywhere. You could get a deflection, as you saw in the first goal. You know, the ball, he had a shot, Martinelli had a shot, ball was deflected, and then Xhaka scored. So just sometimes you just got, someone's got to take an opportunity, and but no, unfortunately that didn't happen, and we did end up going to extra time, didn't we?
Yeah, which was the last thing we wanted. As we've talked about, adding these extra minutes into our players' legs is really not helpful for the game against Crystal Palace. And thankfully, we have got a international break after the Palace game. So I think if we can get through that Palace game with all 3 points, I don't think many Arsenal fans will be that fussed. I think we'll look back and be like, okay, that's what's happened. We've got the 3 points in Palace. We've got a nice little rest now. Well, the non-international players have got a nice little rest. To be fair, we don't have a huge plethora of international players that are going to be going out on duty. We've got Saka, we've got Partey, Xhaka. There's a few, but the majority of our squad will get a big time to rest there, which has come at a good time. Normally, it comes at a pretty frustrating time, doesn't it? And we sort of lose our players just at the wrong time when they're hitting form, or they'll call up a player when he's sort of half injured. I did actually wonder a little bit with the Saliba substitution, whether that could have been a tactical ploy from from Arteta to substitute him off. Sort of claim he's got an injury, which means he misses out on international duty. I think I'm probably thinking, reading into it a little bit too much there, but I couldn't help but think that's the sort of thing Arteta would do. But yeah, extra time, last thing we wanted. But we start off obviously with the reinvigoration of Saka and Partey, and we actually play our best football in these extra time minutes, I would say. And we were unlucky not to get a goal, particularly from the 97th minute effort, when Sporting made that mistake in the midfield, and essentially Trossard runs onto it one-on-one with the keeper. Again, a really good save from the keeper, and tips it onto the post. But that just felt like the moment, didn't it? And once that didn't go for us, I think heads were starting to drop.
Yeah, it really did start to feel like it wasn't going to be our day after that opportunity didn't go in. Trossard, he's been really cool in front of goal recently. He gets that amazing opportunity to be one-on-one with the keeper. And then, as you say, keeper makes... and Sporting keeper was brilliant all day. And you felt like even after he made that save, just to knock it onto the post, you know, you're talking inches in it. If it's inches the other side, then we score and we probably win the tie. But you felt like after that, he'd saved that opportunity and all the saves that he made through the game, that he's going to pull off a couple of worldy saves in the penalty shootout from that point onwards. So it did feel like it was written in the stars from then. Notably, Martin Odegaard, when he came on, though, he was trying to whip up a frenzy and start to get the crowd going, and we were creating opportunities. And it just shows you how much more effective we are when Partey, Odegaard and Saka are on the pitch, that it frees up space in other areas of the pitch for us to create these opportunities. But yeah, unfortunately, we missed that golden chance. But what can you do? Sometimes when it's not going for you, it's just not going for you.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, we did actually conjure up some other good chances in extra time. We caused their keeper to make some big saves, mainly from set pieces, from corners. I know Gabriel went close from a headed opportunity, but we just couldn't get that winner. We did push, especially in the last sort of 10 minutes of extra time, but we just couldn't find it, and it seemed like penalties was going to have to be the way if we were to do it. They even got a man sent off, which I kind of almost half forget about because it happened so late on. But that was a bit of a brutal tackle on Saka, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's if there's one thing that you don't want is to have a game on a Thursday night where Saka has to play minutes and then gets crunched towards the end of it. That's one thing that no Arsenal fan ever wants to see, especially in the position we are in the Premier League at the minute. But yeah, there's a lot of malice in that challenge, wasn't there? It was feet off the floor. I think there's potential that it could have been a straight red, but he got a second yellow card for it. And yeah, it was a deserved red card, but it didn't really mean too much in the whole grand scheme of things because it was so late on in the game. So it was quite unfortunate in that fact. But it meant that I never knew this, but it meant that when you're taking penalties, you have to level up the players. So I think we opted to take off Rob Holding, which we never really got that far in the penalty shootout anyway. But he was then ineligible. I don't know if that's the right word, to then take a penalty kick. So yeah, he was then kind of factored out of the penalty kick takers because you have to have I don't think players are allowed to take more than one penalty before it goes round to the other team or something like that. I'm not quite sure, but he had to step out anyway.
No, I never knew that, but it does make sense, I guess. But yeah, like you said, it didn't come to that anyway, and it very rarely ever does. But yeah, we go on to penalties. Some pretty well taken penalties by our players. I don't think we can really gripe at Martinelli too much. I think this is the time to get around him and support him like we all did with Saka at the Euros. He got it on target, and it was a save from the keeper. You can't really ask for much more than that. It's penalties at the end of the day. Anyone can win. It doesn't matter who you are. It's a penalty. So we just didn't get the the look. We didn't get the look on the flip of the coin to take it the other end of the Emirates in front of our fans. We didn't get the look of who gets to take the penalty first, and we didn't get the look in Martinelli's penalty kick. It just was a very unlucky night, and I think it's now time to talk about the silver lining of it all. And the fact that now we don't have these midweek fixtures, whereas our main rival for the Premier League in Manchester City does. They've got to play several midweek fixtures alongside FA Cup as well, and you know that is a real boost to our Premier League campaign. The fact that we get to have a week rest in between games could be massive. And I think in hindsight, in 2 or 3 months' time, when we look back, we could be looking at this period and this loss as ultimately one of the best things that could have happened to us.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you ask any Arsenal fan or any football fan in general, if they would sacrifice a shot at winning the Europa League to then solidify the chance to win the Premier League, I think they'd all bite your hand off and say, well, yeah, absolutely, we're going to do that. So if you look at it in that respect, then maybe it's not an awful thing that we've been knocked out of the Europa League. And then, as you say, Man City, their manager, Pep Guardiola, the only silverware, the only title that he's not won with Man City is the Champions League. And it's the one title that he's actually really bothered about, to be honest. I think if he was to win the Premier League, then he wouldn't even be that happy. It's something that they've won so many times over the last decade. It's just really that Champions League title that they're dreaming of. And as we see for Man City, they've got to play, I think it is Bayern Munich over 2 legs, and then either Real Madrid or Chelsea over 2 legs. And then they've got the final if they're to progress to the final. So those aren't easy games, and there's no chance that they're going to be rotating for those games. They're going to be playing the full squad, Haaland included. So there's potential for injuries and things like that. But as we all know, Man City have got such a strength in depth, so it might not even matter too much. But yeah, hopefully it does impact the way that Man City play, and it means that they end up swapping players, dropping points, and fingers crossed it means that our players will be more fresh week in, week out, and will be able to pick up points. Most notably in that massive away fixture at Man City, I think, if I'm correct, that is pretty close to one of their big ties in European football. So if it is sandwiched between them, that would be perfect. I've not actually checked the calendar, but that would be great if they could rotate for that game. Maybe play some of their janitors and coaching staff instead of Haaland. That would be great. Thanks.
Well, I've actually got a little, not a statistic, but a little bit of a what's going to happen sort of thing over the next few months. And providing Man City beat Burnley at the weekend, they're going to have 6 midweek games over the next 2 months compared to our 1. And that one game that we have is Manchester City. That game we play against City in the league is a midweek fixture, like it was at home previously. So that is a big advantage for Arsenal. And like you say, I think it's more about the freshness of our players, because we do know how they can be affected by match fitness. You see it in Partey, you see it in Saka. When they're tired, it does reflect within their performances on the pitch. We've got some players like Xhaka that just seem to be able to just play every single minute under the sun and not be affected whatsoever. But Saka is someone that's very mobile in games and does benefit from a little bit of a rest. So it could be huge. It could be huge. So here's hoping we look back at this, in a couple of months and think, that really was beneficial to us. And if it means we win the Premier League, then obviously I don't think any Arsenal fan is going to care about getting knocked out to Sporting Lisbon.
Well, I know I certainly won't care at all. But it's also worth noting the fact that we made these big signings in January to be able to plug some gaps in our team. And when we're still in these different competitions, we've then got to stretch the team to be able to fill those gaps. For example, when you play in Jorginho on a Thursday, so then you can play Partey on a Sunday. But here's to say, like, for example, any of our players could get injured. So say Partey gets injured, then you've got to play Jorginho on both the Thursday and the Sunday. And now we don't have to do that. We've got 2 players to plug one hole rather than potentially one player to try and plug 2 holes kind of thing. So yeah, it's going to be, it could be really integral to the way that we actually end up at the end of the season. Fingers crossed we can keep churning out the performances. And as you say, hopefully Man City slap Burnley the weekend and continue in the FA Cup as well. And if they do, it gives us the opportunity to get another 3 points on the board against Palace, who, by the way, have sacked Patrick Vieira just now, which is quite unfortunate because it seems like every time we play one of these lesser, lower down the league teams, they tend to have a manager bout brewing before we end up playing them. So that's quite unfortunate. And also a bit sad for Patrick Vieira because he's an Arsenal legend. And he did seem like he was doing big things at Palace, especially when he started there. But things just kind of ran away from him recently, haven't they? But fingers crossed we can be 8 points clear.
Yeah, I am disappointed for Patrick actually because I thought he showed real promise. Just unfortunately, he just couldn't get those. Well, it seemed like he just drew loads of games. Not even just this season, last season as well. He just couldn't get those draws into wins. But ultimately, you have to say like they didn't really back him financially, did they? You know that he's still got not really any true striker. I mean, I know they got Eduard, but he's not really lived up to expectations, has he? He's got sort of a little bit of an unsettled Zaha. So I think he's a little bit harsh on Patrick. And I think eventually, if they'd have stuck with him, and backed him a little bit more financially, he could have done some good things at Palace. And I actually do know a few Palace fans that were all sort of that same mindset. So it'll be interesting to see what they think about this. But hopefully they won't actually be able to have a new manager bounce because realistically they've got a couple of days to find a new manager, and that doesn't seem realistic. So hopefully it's a case of no manager, caretaker manager, and that could potentially affect them a little bit. But who knows? It could also be I'm here to prove a point to the next manager, whoever that may be, and they pull out a Sean Dyche because that would be frustrating. Let's hope not, because like I said earlier, if we can get through this fixture, the international break comes and it can be a nice little checkpoint reset period.
Yeah, definitely. Especially as you say, if we were able to take maximum points from this game and we're worth 8 points clear of Man City, we'd be looking at it after the international break, 10 games for us left to play, and to not drop 5 points, but then obviously depending on what Man City get with their game in hand, which we know isn't guaranteed points because they've got to actually win that game in hand. So yeah, you'd be feeling quite cozy, wouldn't you, with a running of 10 games left? So fingers crossed we can actually get ourselves into that position after the weekend.
Yeah. Okay, I think I've pretty much touched on everything I wanted to. Is there anything that you'd want to add any further?
No, there's nothing that I can really think of apart from one thing that you actually sent to me on Twitter earlier was a Spurs fan who is obviously a bit of an Arsenal admirer in secret, and he had to trawl about 2 months through our tweets to be able to find something that it was a clip of Martinelli, wasn't it? Of us saying what I can't remember what we said exactly. Basically, like, "Oh, love this from Martinelli," and it was in January. It was at the start of January that we posted it, and he clipped that and then responded to obviously Martinelli missing the penalty, saying "love this from Martinelli," And it just shows you that how good we've actually been, the fact that he had to scroll that far back through our tweets. And also, I don't know why he's following an Arsenal fans page in the first place. Calls it Arsenal fan, just like Harry Kane. And yeah, I just thought it was quite humorous for you to have sent me that earlier.
It's weird, isn't it? But it just goes to show the level that they'll stoop to. But obviously, we didn't reply, and we'll just we'll just slightly ignore that one. But yeah, if that's everything, that's it from me. I guess we've got the Palace game now to look forward to at the weekend. So the podcast for that will go out shortly thereafter. So please tune in for that one. But until next time, take care, guys.
Catch you later.